I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about how to set sewing goals that actually reflect your values and who you are. So we're going to cover a 5-step process to help you reconnect with why you sew in the first place, how to create criteria for choosing meaningful projects, and ways to make sure the things you're making actually align with the life that you want to live. All right, so our icebreaker for today, Haley, what's a garment you made that turned out beautifully, but that you rarely wore?
So the one that came to mind is a dress that I made and I spent a lot of time on and wore once. It was a silk taffeta dress that I made using like a vintage, like 1950s pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And it had like a very fitted midriff style bodice. So it had like a band at the waist and then like a bodice that was just over the bust. And this really pretty like gathered strap and a skirt that must have been at least a full circle. It was like a very full skirt. And I made it like fully lined with like a silk dechine lining and this really nice taffeta that I got for a steal. It was like a smoky lavender color. It was so pretty. I made it for a special occasion, like you do. And then I never wore it again.
That sounds beautiful.
It was really pretty. And then I got rid of it.
Oh,
It's just the problem with being me and impulsively getting rid of things. But it was really pretty. And I made like 4, 5 mock-ups to get the fit of the bodice just right. And I just wore it one time. It was really not the kind of dress that even to go to like a wedding or anything, like I would probably wear very often at all. And it wasn't really particularly my style. I just got the fabric for a steal.
Yeah.
And then had a vision for the dress, even if it didn't really fit my style, and, you know, made it.
Yeah. It sounds absolutely gorgeous. I just did a big closet clean out and I was thinking like I regret some of the things I've gotten rid of that I made. So this time there were a few things that I just put aside and I put them just into storage for myself in a little basket, because even if I don't wear them, I kind of just sentimental reasons.
Yeah.
Little heirlooms that I want to hold on to.
I know. I need to do that.
There've been a few things, like all those special occasion type things, which I absolutely love to sew.
It's my pitfall.
I know. I made this really pretty set for my sister's wedding several years ago, and it came out so pretty. It was, I don't know if you remember it. It was one of our patterns, I think, for the skirt. It was a wrap skirt, and then I added a ruffle to it. Do you remember that?
I do remember it.
Was it the Laura skirt? Is that the name?
It might have been Laura, or it might have been like a pattern that you used just like a dress you used the skirt for.
Anyway, It was like a wrap skirt, and I made it in the most beautiful silk chiffon in this kind of like deep rusty burgundy color. And then I made this one shoulder top, which was from, I think, a pattern from the 50s, I want to say. And it was so, so pretty. And the color looked really nice on me. And it was just beautiful. And then it just sat in my closet after that. And I never wore it. And I eventually got rid of it because I just never wore it and didn't really see a time when I would wear it again. So I kind of wish I'd at least kept the skirt, because that would have been pretty versatile, but I did not. So I kind of regret that one too. All right. Well, if you have an icebreaker for us for a future episode, you can give it to us by leaving it in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and then we'll answer it in a future episode. All right. So I've been thinking a lot lately about how easy it is for sewing to become just kind of another form of consumption. So instead of shopping for clothes, we're shopping for patterns and fabric, and we sometimes end up with the same result, which is just a closet full of things that we don't actually wear and don't actually use that much. So I noticed this in my own sewing life a few years ago, and I had all of these beautiful fabrics and patterns, but I wasn't really thinking about how they connected to who I am or the kind of life that I wanted to live. I was just kind of collecting them because they were pretty or because they were on sale. And I think there's something in particular with fabric where you don't know if you're going to be able to get it again.
Yeah.
So the other day I was talking to my husband, to Ken, and I was talking about some fabric, I guess. I don't know what brought it up. And he was like, "Oh, I guess with fabric, like you have this impulse to buy it because you don't know if you're gonna be able to get it later." And I was like, "Yes, exactly." So maybe you've noticed something similar, that you're just sewing a lot of trends that maybe don't actually fit your lifestyle, or you're buying patterns and fabric just because they catch your eye and not because there'll be something that's meaningful to you. Or maybe you've just lost touch with the reason that you started sewing in the first place. I think that happens to all of us at some point or another. So today we're going to talk about how to reconnect with your values and make sure that what you're sewing actually reflects who you are and also what matters to you. So, Haley, have you ever gone through periods where you felt disconnected from your why when it comes to sewing?
Yeah, all the time. I think anytime I've ever gone through a big life change that makes me reevaluate my big values, that has a trickle down effect, and it affects how I spend my time, including how I spend my time sewing. But yeah, I think most recently, in the chapter that I'm in now of my life with young children, the reasons that I turned to sewing are really different than they were 6 years ago before I had children. And I had to kind of reassess and find something that felt a way to connect to my sewing that felt more meaningful to me in this chapter.
Yeah, I could see that. Kind of when your values shift, then everything else kind of has to shift around it too.
Uh-huh.
I feel like it's gone both directions for me. There have been times where I felt disconnected from my why around sewing, in that it became just sort of a substitute for shopping,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't feel good. But then it's kind of sometimes gone in the other direction where I just feel less interested in what I look like and in clothing, especially as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
And fashion just isn't as important to me as it is to some people, and it is when I was younger too. And there are periods where I'm just like, I don't really need more clothing, so it becomes less interesting to me. And I think the middle ground for me is when I can remember what I really enjoy about sewing, and it doesn't have to be about quantity or having things. It can be about the process and making stuff with my hands. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's kind of what I've noticed.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the signs that someone might be out of touch with their sewing values?
I think if you are losing interest in things that were once interesting and fulfilling to you, whether that's sewing or something else, it might not necessarily be a bad thing. It might just be you're changing. But it could also be a sign that maybe you're just forgot about what was meaningful to you in the past. You can reconnect to that anytime. So
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I also think that if you feel disconnected from the end product, although you make a good point of, I think sometimes we can focus on the end product too much.
Yeah.
But if our values are, if we're not aligning with our values, I think the end product will reflect that as well.
Yeah. I think also if you stop learning and you stop growing and really pursuing anything that has any kind of challenge, I think that could be a sign. It might depend on the person. Some people might not be interested in that. But I think for most of us, one of the reasons we sew is because it is a little bit challenging and it is fun to learn new things and grow your skills. So
Yeah.
if that's no longer appealing to you, maybe.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think it's going to depend on what your values are.
Yeah.
If your values are really centered on growth and around learning, then yeah, that would be like a major sign.
Yeah.
How do you think that social media has affected this? Do you think that it's made it harder for people to connect with their personal sewing values?
I have a lot of feelings about this. Yes, absolutely. Not just social media, but social media is a big part of it, I think.
Yeah.
I think that there is a lot of messaging out there that tells you more, and there's a lot of distractions in the world. And I think that those things do make it harder to, I think, connect to your values around sewing or anything else.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's just imposing another set of values on you that might not be your own. So, yeah, I think social media can have a lot of really positive effects as well. And you can use it to learn things and connect to people. But it's like with anything, the poison is in the dose.
I was just thinking of that phrase.
And I think the problem is that with social media, with a lot of things on the internet generally, is that they are addictive. And so even though there's good that can come from them, they can lead to too much of a good thing.
Yeah, and if you're spending more time sitting with the messages that are often fed to people, especially women, on social media than sitting with our own values, then that's the part that becomes, the poison. Is that I think that it is like really insidious, and it becomes so like entangled.
Yeah.
With like your own value.
Yeah. I also think that the world is a very nuanced and complex place, and there's a lot to think about and there's a lot to explore. And I think that social media and just media generally flattens that and makes you focus on the superficial.
Mm-hmm.
That takes time away from thinking about maybe some of the deeper things that might have a stronger impact in your life. So that's another. And I think that does relate to your sewing, your creativity, your hobbies, all of the things that might bring you joy in your life. So
yeah,
I'll get off my high horse now about social media because I do think it is useful. And obviously we use it for seam work or we're on social media. But again, it's about the amount and how you use it.
Yeah, I think it's such a powerful tool to connect us with people and to show us like different perspectives. But when it's distracting you, when it's making you feel not good about yourself, is when it's like, for me, is always signs to take like a little break, take a step back. All right, well, let's get into some of the tips on how you can really like realign yourself with your sewing values or land on something that feels really authentic to you. So our first tip is going to be remember why you started to sew in the first place. I think this is such an important place to start because our initial motivation often holds the key to what matters most to us about sewing. For me, I started sewing because I couldn't access clothing that fit my curvy body and also my personal style. I felt like really pigeonholed into like one kind of style. And I wanted something that was an intersection of both of those things. What about you, Sarai? What got you started with sewing?
I was a teenager when I started sewing, and I wanted to like wear fun, crazy clothes that I couldn't afford to buy or couldn't find. So it was really about self-expression and making cool things that I had in my imagination.
Yeah. It's like a starting off point for so many of us. I think it's important to take some time to write down your original motivation. Maybe it could be something like wanting better fitting clothes, expressing your creativity, making things you couldn't find in stores, following a family tradition, learning a practical skills. These are all like really common ones we hear all the time. Whatever it was, that original spark can help remind you what drew you to sewing in the first place. Sometimes just reconnecting with that initial motivation can really be energizing and add a little bit of clarity for you.
Yeah, absolutely. The next one is to explore how your reasons for sewing have evolved. So, our reasons for sewing often change over time, and I think that's totally normal. So, for me, I started sewing because I wanted these really unique clothes that expressed my personal style. And that's still true today. Still think self-expression is a big part of it for me. But over time, it also became about the kind of meditative quality of making something with my hands and disconnecting from screens. I just notice, first of all, that I feel better anytime I'm creating something beautiful with my hands and body. I think that's just a really natural human impulse to do those things. And I feel better physically when I'm doing it, like actually the act of doing it. The other thing is I like having something that is made by my own hands or that's made by human hands and that I feel connected to in some way. I think so much of our world is becoming mass produced and mechanistic. I like having something that feels very human to wear. So I think it's worth taking the time to reflect on how your relationship with sewing has changed over time. So some reasons people might sew today include sustainability and reducing consumption. I know that's a big thing for many people. The joy of the creative process itself, the community and the connections you've made through sewing, building a wardrobe that really works for your life, or just the satisfaction of mastering difficult techniques. I feel like these are all reasons that for a lot of people come a little bit later with sewing. I feel like the reasons that most people get into it are more about the excitement and the fun of making something. Sometimes it's something specific you want to make. Sometimes it's just the whole idea of creating something from scratch. Sometimes it's, a fabric that you saw that really inspired you. I feel like there's usually some specific thing like that. And then as you get more into it, these other reasons tend to layer on top of that and emerge. And I think that's really, really interesting. So I think these are all valid reasons, and they might continue to shift depending on what's happening in your life. So has your reason for sewing changed over time, Haley, or have you added any new ones?
Yeah, I think that as a designer and creativity, I think everybody is creative, but working in something that's like very directly related to my hobby, it's become really important to me to continue my sewing practice because it connects me with my personal creative perspective. As a designer, it's my job to like take on the design perspective of the place that I'm working at. That doesn't mean like I dislike what I design, but it's like I'm not designing for myself. I'm designing for Seamwork. And when you're spending so much time living in that creative world, you have to like dissect. You have to extract yourself from that and have your own creative outlets that allow you to express your own personal perspective. And I think that my personal sewing practice, alongside other hobbies I have, like anchor me in self.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become more important to me in that way. It's very like in line with why I started, but it's evolved just as like my life and my career has evolved.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I feel like that's also a lot of people, especially as you get older, and I'm sure this is, I've heard from friends who are parents, true about having kids, like you kind of lose a little bit of that sense of self because you're giving yourself so much to other people. I mean, I think that's true oftentimes for people, whether they have kids or not. Sewing is one practice, and I think a lot of creative hobbies are, of coming back to yourself and prioritizing your own needs once again. For me, it can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. All right, our next tip is to create an overarching goal for your sewing practice. Once you understand why you sew, you can create a kind of mission statement for your sewing practice. This doesn't have to be complicated. It could be something as simple as I sew to create a sustainable wardrobe that fits my body and makes me feel confident. Or maybe it's I sew to express my creativity and disconnect from my analytical day job. I encourage you to write this down, maybe even make it pretty and hang it up in your sewing space. Having this visual reminder can keep you focused on your why, even when you're tempted by that sale fabric that doesn't really align with your goals. Sari, do you have an overarching goal for your sewing?
I was thinking about this, and I think it's very kind of simple, which is just to create something beautiful. I think that's it. I know I was reading this newsletter the other day, and I wish I could remember where it was that I read this, but it was called something like Why Create Something Beautiful? And it was about this person, and he was building this rose garden in his home with like, I don't know, 100 varieties of roses. This was a huge project that was, a ton of work and very expensive. And so it was about why do this? Like, why is this important? And it's kind of like that for me. It's, I think, just this very normal human impulse to make something that's beautiful to enjoy and for other people to enjoy. And that's it. Just like that's worth it just for its own sake for me. And I think that's a big reason for me right now. So if I were going to boil it down to something very simple, that's what I would say.
I love that. I think that's a great one. And I think the cool thing about having this kind of North Star is that makes decision making so much easier. So when you're wondering like whether to start a project, you could ask yourself if it aligns with this mission statement that you created, whether it's to create something beautiful or to like practice your creativity, which would probably be mine, or like spend time with my creative self.
Yeah, absolutely. Like for me, I think if I were focusing on this mission and thinking about projects, that might lead me to make different choices, like to do something maybe that's a little bit more complicated or a little bit more detailed or stretched my abilities a little bit more if I thought it would be worthwhile because it's something beautiful. All right, the next one, which, I've kind of touched on here, is developing criteria for choosing those new projects. So this is where we get really practical. Based on your sewing mission, what specific criteria should a project meet before you take it on? I find it's really helpful to make an actual checklist and then refer back to it whenever you're starting something new. So your criteria might include questions like, does this actually fit my lifestyle and not just my fantasy lifestyle? Will I wear this at least X number of times? Maybe it's 30 times, maybe it's 10 times. Do I already have the skills to make this, or am I excited to learn the new skills that it requires? Does this work with other items in my wardrobe? Do I have a specific occasion or need for this item? So those are just some examples. The number of criteria a project needs to meet is up to you. Maybe you decide 3 out of 5 is enough, or maybe you want projects to meet all your criteria, but you can set those boundaries for yourself. The point is really just to be intentional rather than impulsive. So, Haley, do you have any specific criteria that you use when you're choosing projects?
I really like the criteria that we've talked about before, which is we have an episode of the podcast about it. It's called the Rule of 3. And it's the rule of 3 outfits. Can I think of 3 outfits that I would wear this garment with? And then the other thing that I think of is like, what are the contexts that I would wear this to? And for me, I really want it to fit like at least a couple of the contexts in my life, unless I'm making something for a very specific purpose that I need filled, like if I need to make athletic wear or something. I find that those 2 things help me to make sure that I'm making choices for garments that I'm going to wear.
I think just having even one thing like that because that's an easy thing to keep in your mind. You don't even need to have a checklist. You can just, does it meet this criteria that I've set out for myself?
Yeah.
It can be super helpful.
Yeah, it's really helped me. I have like a real like weakness for sewing special occasion things, and it's really kept me from making taffeta dresses that I will only wear once. All right. And then lastly, identify what's not for you in your sewing practice. Sometimes knowing what you don't want and what you don't want to make is just as important as knowing what you do want to make. And this isn't about judging what other people sew. It's about being honest with yourself about what actually works for you. These can even be things that aren't right for you right now. So for example, some things that I've decided not to sew in this season of my life are jeans. I'm just like, I have jeans I like. I don't need more. Bras. I'm nursing and they're doing weird things. I don't need to concern myself with that right now. Anything special occasion, things that require a strapless bra, they're not for me right now. Garments that may need more than one muslin, I've really limited time to sew right now, and I just don't have time to get stuck in the weeds of fitting. That's an example. That's my personal list of not for me. But your not for me list might include certain styles that don't work for your body or your lifestyle, fabrics that require special care that you're just like not willing to provide, projects that are purely trend driven with no staying power, techniques that cause you more frustration than joy. Having this list can really be freeing because it gives you permission to admire certain things without feeling like you need to make them yourself. Sarai, is there anything that you've identified as your not for you in sewing?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that I've realized more recently is I love like a full skirt and like lots of fabric around me, but or in general, like I like that look and I always admire those clothing, but I don't really like them on me. Like I don't like wearing them. So that's one of the things that I've identified as being not for me. I like more flow in my clothing.
Yeah.
And that's helped me to make different fabric choices and different pattern choices when I'm deciding what to make. And I really like things that are just slinky and flowy. And even if they're full, maybe it's made in a rayon challis or a silk or something that flows more around my body than something that's like crisp and stands out. So
Yeah.
that's something that I've noticed more lately. That's, I think, a good example.
Oh, that is a good example. It's a really specific example too. And I think that you can get like as specific or big with these like no-fly lists as you'd like. And I think that making this list can really help prevent that feeling of guilt when you see something, when you see a beautiful project on social media that you like want to make. And maybe you start shooting yourself, oh, I should make something like that. But if it's not right for you, it's not for you.
Yeah. You can still admire things that aren't right for you. All right, we've covered a lot today about setting meaningful sewing goals. We talked a lot about remembering why you started sewing, recognizing how your reasons might have evolved, creating an overarching mission for your sewing practice, developing specific criteria for new projects, and identifying what's just not for you. So what's your takeaway from this episode, Haley?
I really like the not for you list. These are things that I kind of have thought about, like in passing, like, oh, like, I don't like things I have to wear a strapless bra with, things like that. But spending a few minutes to write out what's not for me is really helpful. It actually is helping me work through some of my summer sewing plans as we speak. So I love it.
Yeah. I really like the idea of having a really simple sewing mission statement, like a very simple one. And I kind of want to do that thing of printing it out and putting it in my sewing room, maybe making a quilt out of it or something would be really cool, and then hanging it up.
Embroidering it?
Yeah. That would be really fun.
That would be cool.
So one of my many projects that I can't fit all of them in. I'll have to decide, but I like that idea quite a bit. And I have been wanting to make some kind of wall quilt or something. So that would be fun. All right. Well, if you've been thinking about being more intentional with your sewing, we have a couple of brand new patterns this week that might fit perfectly into your wardrobe plan, which are the Rosa dress and the Yarrow tiered skirt. So the Rosa is a fit and flare pullover dress with elastic shaping that's incredibly versatile. And the Yarrow is an elastic waist, two-tiered skirt with a pleated hem that's designed to work beautifully with border prints and eyelet fabrics, both of which I absolutely love sewing at this time of year. So both of these patterns are designed to be wardrobe staples that you'll reach for again and again. So exactly the kind of intentional sewing that we've been talking about today. But if they don't meet your criteria, that's fine too. We have over 250 patterns that our members have access to, so you're sure to find something that you love. Members can access these patterns right now at seamwork.com. And if you like this episode, please consider leaving us a review. We love to hear from you guys. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. You can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join. And that's it for us this week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. Podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.